Well, who saw this coming? Agatha Christie, eat your heart out because guess what? Brexit's just murdered the Orient Express. Yes, probably one of the most famous sort of train services in the entire world, pretty much made famous by the book Murder on the Orient Express. It's known as probably one of the most impressive, elegant, moving hotels in the entire world. It's a train service that if you were to ask a train service, people would probably respond with either Eurostar or the Orient Express. That's how well known this service is. But of course, this November in comes biometric checks, which means that anyone entering Europe will have to give fingerprints. I think you have to have your face scanned, and that is going to add a whole lot of time to your passport application. And trust me, I was in a line at a French airport when I was on my way to Monaco earlier this year for a JCI meeting. And oh boy, I was stood in that queue and I was just listening to the conversations around me, and I'm like, yeah, people aren't going to stand for this too much longer. This will not take long to reverse at this point. But to say that now Brexit has now completely offed the Orient Express, something which is that well known. It's just unbelievable that this would obviously end up happening. But again, this is something Brexiteers said, oh, stuff like this will never happen. But here we are. If you want to get the Orient Express now, well, guess what? You can't get it in London. If you want to get on the Orient Express, you have to go to France. So, as always, before we find out who murdered the Orient Express, you know, if you've seen the title, then you obviously know who. But no spoilers for the book either down below. But before we go into talking about this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel. So now, over we go to today's story. Again, Orient Express to axe its UK section after 41 years due to Brexit. When the Orient Express began operating in the 19th century, passports were optional. The only paperwork required by the British travellers was a copy of the Thomas Cook Continental Timetable. But Brexit and its 21st century biometric checks are killing off the romance of crossing borders for modern passengers looking for the nostalgia of a luxury train journey inspired by Agatha Christie and Hollywood. Belmont, the company who runs today's Venice Salon Orient Express, has decided to drop its London to Folkestone leg of the route because it has become too difficult to cross the border to Calais. Until now, passengers have been able to ride in the Art Deco carriages from the British Pullman service from Victoria Station to London to Folkestone. Then they would board coaches to cross the channel to meet Belmont's Continental train at Calais. Then, as night falls, they dress for dinner in a compartment for one of the vintage 1920s cars that costs around £3,000 to £10,000 per person. So an evening dress is required, and jeans, as Hercule Poirot would expect, are banned. The coach transfer then creates the unacceptable risks for Belmont, as there is no way for their passengers to avoid delays crossing the channel. And travellers, including school and coach parties, had to wait up to 14 hours at Dover at the beginning of the Easter holidays just 2 weeks ago, and people are forced to queue for the shuttle. Things will get worse, as Belmont fears, because the UK and the EU are planning new biometric passport checks and extra red tape. We're just adjusting operations in 2024 ahead of the enhanced passports and border controls, the Belmont spokesman said. We want to avoid any risk to further travel disruptions for our guests and delays and missing train connections, and this provides the highest level of service as streamless and relaxed as possible. The EU is introducing a new biometric entry and exit system, which will mean that most people traveling across the channel who do not have EU residency will need to provide further fingerprints and a facial recognition data when they cross the border instead of just having their passport stamped. If the technology works smoothly, it could mean that travelers over 12 years old will be able to use the electronic entry gates and potentially save some time. But since even babies will need to provide biometric data, there is skepticism in the tourism industry to how these checks will actually work in practice. The EES was due to begin this year, but is now likely to come into force after the 2024 Paris Olympics. And soon the EU and the UK will be making travellers pre-submit pre-travel authorization forms to submit to the United States ETA scheme. British travellers will have to pay €7 to give European authorities personal information not on their passports, such as criminal convictions, education, and parents' first names, under the ETIAS, the European Travel Information Authorization Scheme. The European travellers will provide similar details to the British government for the UK's electronic travel authorization programme, though Whitehall has actually yet to set a fee for it. This is not a great material for cozy mystery stories. Technology has made things easier, said Mark Smith, the founder of the travel train site, The Man in Seat 61. But one thing is made harder is the border crossings. In the old days, whatever borders you are at, you just go, there's your passport, there you go. Suddenly, everyone wants to take your fingerprints as if you're a criminal. Losing the British Pullman was a huge shame, he said. The British Pullman has the hors d'oeuvres that you set up with a smoked salmon and champagne on the way from London to Folkestone on the traditional boat train route that passengers heading to the Orient Express would have used back in the 1930s. Joining the Continental train at Calais just in time to get dressed for dinner was wonderful. Passengers from London will have to take the high-speed modern Eurostar to Paris to then join the train, but it's not the same, he said. It's a great shame if that's part of the experience now gone. It's not that VSO is entirely authentic compared to the original service, he added. It's a much better business-like train than most people actually imagine. The real thing would have not had pianos or lounges or even bars, certainly no balcony, wherever Kenneth Bragger actually thinks. You would have to have sleeping cars that sat in your compartment in this day to most of the time. And of course, I think it goes on to just talk about a bit of the history. But yeah, that's what essentially has happened. We've now lost a massive piece of rail history. And that's just the reality of the situation. If they are going, well, actually, we've seen the delays at Dover, just that was what is causing these coaches, these delays. Well, yeah, of course that's going to happen. Of course. And what do you expect now? But that's the reality. As we've always said, there will always be a reality to the situation. And once again, something that Brexiteers are going to be sort of responsible for. And it's just a shame that such a thing that has been operating for years is now gone. And it's not just obviously this. We talked about the Clooney Lace Company very recently. There's a whole swathe of companies that we don't, as we said before, we don't even know who have made the headlines. Have had to close up shop because of Brexit, because they can't export anymore. So that's the reality, unfortunately. And we always said there would be a reality, but the Brexiteers just denied the fact that this was going to be a thing or an actual consequence to what they wanted. We saw Ben Habib just yesterday spewing the same nonsense that, oh, you don't understand, we need low taxes, low regulation. Well, no, people don't want that. People didn't want that. That was one of the things that they denied very, 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 very much during the referendum. And it's something, as I've said before, the Remain campaign should have pointed out that these big contradictions between what Brexiteers are saying. They can't agree on what Brexit should be, which is part of the problem where we are now. And the thing is, really, we're ending up drifting back into the EU, which is what we always said would eventually happen. Every economist says it the same. Brexit is what's causing these problems. Until you solve that problem, we can't start to solve other problems either. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time. And this is the point where I realize I should have had some sort of Poirot moustache to go, but never mind. As always, take it away, Hastings. Take it away.